Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining us today for Simplify Customer Success with Closed Loop Playbooks. We have our founder and CEO, Paul Philp, here today. Just some housekeeping notes before we get started. Feel free to tweet us your questions and join the conversation online with the hashtag SimpleCS, and you can feel free to mention us at Amity. We'll be sending the recording and the slides after the webinar, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask us using the questions box. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Paul Philp.
Thanks, Matthew. My name is Paul Philp. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Amity, and I'd like to thank everyone for coming out today. So today we're going to talk about how to simplify the life of a customer success manager and a customer success team and a customer success organization. And we've talked to, over the 4 years that Amity has been in development and in market, we've talked to probably 1,000 customer success teams, and we constantly hear the same feedback from those customer success teams that their goal is to be proactive, the goal is to be strategic, the goal is to be a coach for their customers, but there's so much complexity and so much ad hoc email and so many manual processes that it's very hard for a customer success manager in that environment to get proactive, to get on top of all of their customers. And so today I'm going to be talking about one dimension of the pathway to becoming proactive, to putting out the fire that you're always firefighting, and to get strategic as a customer success manager and as a customer success organization. But the first thing we need to do is identify the sources of the complexity that gets in the way of the typical customer success team. So I'm going to talk about a few during this slide, but I'll throw it out to you. What are the things that cause you to experience that complexity? What gets in your way of simplifying the process? And at the bottom of your Ready Talk widget, there's a chat window. If you have an idea, just throw it out to me, and I'll bring it up for this conversation with everybody. But I'd really love to know what's adding the complexity to your job as a customer success manager. Certainly, one of the sources of complexity is that there is theoretically a ton of data available about your customers. The problem is that it's distributed through a lot of different systems. So you may use a product like MailChimp or Intercom to communicate with your customers, and some of the data is over there. And you may use a product like Zendesk or Freshdesk to manage your customer support tickets. So part of the data is in there, and you almost certainly will have some data in a spreadsheet. Okay, we're getting some great feedback here. So one source of complexity is prioritizing different goals. Absolutely. If you have 6 different goals to accomplish at any given time, they can interfere with each other, and re-engaging with at-risk customers. Great. Too many cooks reaching out to the client. Exec, sales, customer success, onboarding, ProServe. Yeah, that's a lot of complexity. Who's in charge? Who should be talking now? And then that adds the confusion and the frustration to your customer as well, which we always end up having to deal with. Great. So prioritizing different goals, too many cooks, and this mess of data that you have to work with. And oh, great, we're getting more. How to position the CM with the customer as their advocate, but not as tech support. Exactly. What is the customer success manager there to do? How do they fit into the overall picture? Great feedback. Okay, so we take all of this data, we take all of those different goals, we take the too many chefs talking to the customer, and the customer not really fully understanding what the CSMs do, and we insert what I call customer success magic. When I was in university, we'd watch a math professor solve some problem on the board, and at some point it would just be like, insert magic here, and then there's a solution. And so customer success people are the magicians. You take all of that math and all of that complexity and turn that into renewals, retention, upsells, trial conversions, efficiency, visibility, and advocacy, all of the things that you're being asked to do as a customer success manager. So this leads to, it's a lot of time to deal with all of that data. It's hard to really get any picture of what's going on with your customer when the data is spread all over that place. It's hard to know what you should be doing next when you've got multiple confusing goals and there's 5 people talking to the customer and the customer doesn't even know what you do. So you're powerful wizards, customer success managers, because you take all of that math and turn it into the results that you produce. So the dream is to have a customer success command center, a mission control for customer success, a place where you can get all of the data you need and you can focus in on what really matters. And underneath the command center are all the automated tasks that you need to do. If Elon Musk ran every SpaceX launch the way most customer success teams manage today, I'm not entirely convinced that they'd be landing those rockets back on the deck on the platform in the middle of the ocean. So just like SpaceX needs a command center to get a complex task done, customer success needs a command center to get their task done. But the task of a customer success manager is very, very different than the task that most automation systems and most information systems are designed to solve. And we really have to be clear about that, or else we're going to make really big mistakes. So the challenge is we need to integrate the processes. We need to build repetitive processes, standardized processes, so that we have clear goals, so that we know who should be talking with the customer now. We need to get that standardization in place, but the processes that customer success people manage are really, really different than the workflows that get automated at your bank. The process of automating the approval for a mortgage is very different than onboarding and launching a new customer or doing a QBR. And some of those differences are that it's really people intensive. That's the defining characteristic of customer success is whether you're talking by phone or online meeting or through email or messaging through intercom, or even email automations, you're talking to a human being on the other side. And so it's very people intensive. It's very information rich. There's very little information that goes into the mortgage approval business, maybe your credit score, but there's a ton of information that goes into the customer success processes. It's irregular and unpredictable. I don't know about your business, but in our business, we haven't seen 2 renewal cycles go the same way with any 2 of our customers. We haven't seen the implementation process go the same way for any of our customers. So there's this, there's a pattern. There's something similar to each implementation, but it's also very irregular and unpredictable. And so the processes end up being loosely structured. They're not detailed recipes. Like if you go over and work at your local bank, they'll give you a binder that explains to you the process of getting a mortgage approved. There ain't no binder in customer success. There's some goals, there's some outlined tasks, but ultimately it's you working with the customer that solves the problems. And then the last bit is that it's collaborative. No customer success manager is an island. You're always working collaboratively with your customers, and you're working collaboratively with your team members or your product team or your dev team or your sales team. And so these are very different types of processes than the standard business processes that IT companies have been automating for years. Okay. So those processes are designed to eliminate manual work. They don't have a lot of information. They're really cookie cutter and really standardized and predictable. Like I said, the manual's there. And it's really hierarchical and controlling. No, if this mortgage is more than $623,000 and the credit rating is less than 722, then you need to go to the senior vice president of commercial blah blah blah. All of that is spelled out in grinding detail, and so that approach isn't going to work. There's no recipe for customer success. There's just a dynamic process that counts on your relationship skills, that counts on your creativity, that counts on your domain knowledge. And so those processes are very different. And if we're going to talk about how to automate some of those processes, we really have to keep that in mind. Okay. As I go along, I just want to remind you that there's a chat box down at the bottom. If something isn't clear, or if you have any questions, please let me know. Okay. Okay. So we end up with this pile of data and unclear processes, and we have to work dynamically and conversationally with our customers. And so we need a different style of process. And at Amity, we call this kind of process a closed loop process. Yeah, someone just asked if we send out the slides later. Absolutely. The slides and recordings always come after within 24 hours. So a closed loop process is one that has an internal process to it, an internal workflow. You've definitely got, this is how we onboard a customer, or this is how we train a customer, or this is how we renew a customer. But and this is especially relevant if you've been listening to some of Kia's great webinars lately. Really dependent on the customer journey. If you go to train a customer before you've got the basic implementation in place, Or if you try to go to renew a customer who's not getting any value, it's just not going to be very successful. So you need to combine standardized internal workflows with the sense of following the customer journey, always being in a dance with the customer. And I'll give you a couple of examples and just try to make that a little more clear. So here's one example. These are, this is an example of a trial conversion playbook workflow. So on the, it always starts with a sign up, and then the sign up starts the customer's journey. So that, they might do a setup, and then they play around with the product. When I sign up for a trial, I play around with the product. And I'm trying to learn what it does, and I'm trying to see where it begins and see where it ends. And I'm not terribly worried during this period about whether or not it solves my problem or whether I would get value from it. I'm getting oriented by playing. And then, but if I get past that phase and it looks interesting, then I start to think about the business value and how it's going to help me. So I'm on this journey, but internally, you think about this as, well, you got to onboard them, so that, you're going to need to create an instance for them. You're going to need to create an account for them. You need to send them a welcome email. You need to make sure that they see the training, the initial onboarding checklist, maybe a video. So you've done an onboarding process for the trial, and then you want to see how they're progressing, because if they're progressing and they look like they might be a prospect, then you want to coach them. So if you see somebody who's starting to play around with the features, starting to get familiar with the product, then you want to start to coach them into how to use more advanced features and how to start thinking about getting value from the product. And then you want to, if you coach them into getting value and they're starting to get value, then you want to convert them. And so you've got two very, very different processes happening at the same time. You've got the internal process that you're managing your process to, but you're dancing with the customer's process here, the customer's journey here. And if they're at setup and you try to coach them about how to get value, you're just going to seem weird to them or ineffective to them. So you really have to dance with them in that process. Okay? And to give you another example of a closed loop playbook, here we have an adoption playbook. So you've got an account, they've been onboarded, they've been trained, and you're seeing low adoption. And so you want to intervene with them to help them build their adoption. And so, it always begins at launch. And so, you're bringing them on board, but they're not adopting. So the internal workflow is you launch them, then you train them, then you try to coach them, and then you try to get them to maintain their performance. But the customer journey that you might want to watch is they're at 10% adoption. They're at 25% adoption. And you want to see how long it takes them to get from 10% to 25% adoption. And then they're at 50% adoption. And so the customer journey and the internal business process are very different things altogether, but they fit together like a hand in glove. They're tailored to each other. And again, it's very much a dance with your customer. And this thinking this way, tuning your internal business processes to your customer's journey is really one of the most important ways of becoming proactive. Okay? Those are two examples of processes that you have to manage that are very much tied with the customer journey. Can you think of any processes in your business that really lend themselves to this closed loop approach, where you have an internal process and a customer journey that you have to manage in parallel at the same time? Just drop me a note at the back end. Adopt, yeah. Grow, expand, absolutely. Renew, absolutely. If you're trying to renew a customer at 10% adoption, you better be a pretty good salesperson. It's not necessarily going to go very well. That's great. And same with grow. Same with grow. Okay. Okay, so how do we build these closed loop playbooks? How do we get the insights that we need? How do we know what's happening in the customer's journey? And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we think about that process at Amity and how we think about that in our product. But I'm not going to tie it to any particular Amity features. This applies whether you're building your own homegrown system or just looking for a customer success platform yourself. But this is definitely the way that we think about it at Amity. And it begins with really understanding your customers precisely. And at Amity, we think of that as having a bunch of sensors that tell you where your customer is at, how they're performing, how they're using the product, what value they're getting in the product, where they are in their journey, where they are in the life cycle. And so this is the basic building block of a closed loop type playbook, of a closed loop type process, having sensors that will tell you what's happening with your customer. And we think that there are 4 types of sensors. There's probably more. If you think of one, just drop me a note back at the bottom in the chat session. So there's product usage data. They logged in, they opened this dialogue, they ran this application, they viewed this dashboard, they added a user. All the things that you want to see in the feature usage. So that's one type of sensor. Second type of sensor is certainly the customer outcomes. These are the KPIs that your customers are using to measure the value that they get from your product, or the KPIs that you use to see if customers are getting value from the product. These will be very different depending on the nature of your business, but it could be, if you're a marketing automation system, that you're managing visits, or if you're a project planning system, you're managing projects started. But your outcomes will be different than any other business. The next type are revenue drivers. So you might sell by the user, and your customer has bought a 10-user package, and they have 9 active users. So that means that there's an upgrade possibility coming, and if they're getting if they have good adoption and they're getting the outcomes that you like them to see, it could be an upsell opportunity. Another one type is operational data. Did the system go live in time? Did the implementation start on time? Did the onboarding finish in the time it was supposed to take? All the operations that you have to manage with your customer. So we think of 4 types of sensors. Very good. I think engagement with your customers, emails, webinars, event participation, absolutely. I think engagement's absolutely a type of sensor, and we should absolutely add it to the list. Okay, so multiple types of sensors, and so here we're starting to tame that big mess of data that you have to deal with. But this is still going to be, just having a usage sensor or an outcome sensor, that's going to still be pretty noisy. There's not going to be a lot of signal there. And so the next type of sensor are what we call aggregate sensors. This is when you take data from different sensors and combine them together in some sort of algorithmic way to get a calculated sensor. So it may be a trend sensor, it may be a ratio, the 1 user out of 10 purchase or quota, some sort of rate to mark progress, some sort of benchmark. And these calculated sensors, now you're starting to filter through that data. You're starting to dig through the mountain of data, looking for the gold, and trying to get the gold. And I'll give you an example of this type of calculated sensor that we've built for a few of our customers. And so this is to build a benchmark index. And here you can see that you've got an outcome KPI sensor that you're tracking, so this might be visitors. And then you've got a goal that you've set for this customer. You're aiming to get that goal. And I apologize, the divide icon there should be black, but it's white. So you're dividing them, and that'll give you the performance. So they're at 42% of their goal, or they're at 120% of their goal. And then if you take another sensor that tells you what industry they're in, and then you put that through another calculation which will rank their performance in that industry, then what you end up with is a benchmark. And now you know that they're in the top quartile or the bottom quartile of all of the customers in that industry. And so, instead of just having a number here, 41 visits, now you have the fact that they're in the top 25% of all of your customers in that industry. And so, or they're in the bottom 25%. So that's a way that by using calculations and calculated sensors, you can really take a lot of noise and pretty easily turn it into a nice powerful signal, a nice clear signal. And you can see that the insight level, the insight that you get from a sensor increases as you do this kind of analysis based on the data. I'll throw it out to the audience. What kind of analytics would you like to see about your customers that would really tell you how they're doing? Okay. So here we're going to talk about a complete definition of a sensor, and these are all of the elements of the sensor in the Amity platform. I think these are going to be pretty standard no matter how you go about building your sensors and using your sensors. But I pick on an example, visits this month. So visits this month is your sensor. And so you've got the value, 749, and the units. So you had 749 people. And then you can start putting some cleaning functions on that. You can say that the min is 10 and the max is 10,000, and the goal for this customer is 2,500, and so the value is 749. Their score is 23%, and that puts them in the at minus 50% or in the bottom quartile for your customers. And so you're already starting to get some actionable insights by having the sensor, and this really starts to tell you where your customers are in their journey. And then you can do analytics on a sensor, so you can have a trending analytic. So what's the current period divided by the previous period, or the 30-day average, or status, how are they doing versus the previous period? What's the health score? You can set a health score, so if the benchmark is less than minus 33, you might want to put set an insight called bottom and turn it to red for their health score. You might want to turn certain insights on when the score is less than 20%. Give them a low visits when a score is when the status is less than 50%. Their visits are actually declining. And then here's where you can start to connect the sensors into your playbooks. So when the insight low visits is true, perform start a playbook called low visits. And when the status is less than 20%, you might just want to put them into an escalation. And so we've gone from all that raw data now into some really detailed analytics, some really detailed insights. You've got the ability to set thresholds so that you know that this is good, this is bad, and then the ability to take action based on that insight. So these are the capabilities you need to really be able to monitor and follow and measure your customer's journey, and connect that into your onboarding processes or into your adoption process. So if you're a marketing automation company, you may have an adoption process to make sure that after 6 months that they're at 85% of their visits goal. So this is the capability you need to be able to do that, turn that raw data into actionable insights. Okay, any questions about that? I know this is a new concept, and I don't want to go too fast. So is this blindingly obvious to you, or is there something that another type of sensor you'd like me to talk about? Anything that you'd like me to cover at all? Okay. I'm surprised clients are willing to share data like that. We do run into customers who don't get a lot of data from their customers, but we got most of our customers do have access to a lot of their customers' data, and so that they can guide them effectively. What happens when the clients aren't willing to share data with us, which happens a lot? If they're not willing to share data with you, you still have things like usage data, and you, depending on your product, it's hard to know about your product, but you can measure, some of the results that they're getting on your system, and see it that way. A lot of our customers have that kind of internal measurement that they get. But but if a customer's not really willing to give you their outcome data, then usage data is probably going to be the best you can get from them. Okay, so let's tie this together. So let's tie it all together and talk about how you can build out these closed loop playbooks. And I'm going to use the Amity playbook structure for going through this today. But this can be a manual playbook structure that you're using. This can be a spreadsheet that you're using. But it's just convenient for us to use the Amity structure. So here we have one playbook that is the adoption playbook, and it has two components. It has an internal workflow component and a customer journey workflow component. And in the internal workflow component, you have a linear set of steps and perhaps some tasks. So it might start with at risk. So after 3 months, you want them to have 75% of their goal in terms of a key metric, and they're below that, so they're at risk. You want to then do an analysis and see what's happening there, see why they aren't performing the way that you would hope they would perform, and then you have a program to reach out to them and go through their results with them, maybe start to coach them a little bit. Maybe you'll put together a training program so that they learn some of the more advanced ways of using your product so they can get their results up. And then after that, you want to track whether that worked or not. And so in this playbook, which is an Amity fully customizable, we created a sensor that measures the percent improvement from a particular date in a KPI. And so we have a 10% threshold, a 25% threshold, 50% threshold, and a greater than 75% threshold. And there's a timeline. We want to see them get to that level by a certain date. So they might have 30 days to get to 10% improvement, and another 30 days to get to 25% improvement. And so you're actually monitoring and measuring their customer journey in terms of improvement on a key adoption metric. And by doing that, you can actually see how well are they improving, how well did our outreach and training impact them, and if they get stuck at 25%, you may want to throw them back into the beginning of the at-risk stage and take them through the process again. So again, this is an internal workflow. These are the steps you take, and then you're tying it together with the customer's journey, and that you're measuring with a sensor. And now you can really be proactive. Now you know that they're at risk because they weren't adopting the product fast enough, or they weren't getting value fast enough. You intervened with them when you saw that after a certain period of time, and then you can track their improvement over the next period of time and see whether your intervention took or not. Okay. Great. Did that make sense? Any questions? Okay, so let me go back to the beginning. So we've talked a lot about the idea of a closed loop process one where you're following your own internal workflow, a standardized workflow, but you're tying it together with where your customer is in your journey, in their journey. And we've seen a number of different ways of defining the customer journey. So, by the feature complexity, logging in and setting up, to building dashboards, whatever that progression is, to the actual results that they're producing, to tracking the improvement that they're making in those particular results. So there's a lot of different ways of defining the customer's journey and measuring it. So we talked about how tying these together is really the foundation of simplifying your life as a customer success manager and making the process more proactive. And then we talked about a couple of examples, and then we talked about the importance of, to get at that customer journey data, the idea of a customer sensor that will actually tell you what's happening with your customers, what features they're using, what outcomes they're producing, how many units, what they've purchased, they've consumed, and are they on time or off track on certain of their projects, and then combining that together into a playbook. Into playbooks that let you manage both types of processes, internal processes and customer journey processes, using a manual stage definition for your internal process and sensor threshold levels for the customer journey. Many, many different ways of doing this, and we see our customers really doing some cool and pretty innovative type analysis with the sensors that they use in Amity. Okay, and then just to wrap up, I'll spend just 2 minutes on the Amity platform, how we implement closed loop playbooks. So it all starts with the listen phase, all of the customer sensors that you would imagine. And then the understand phase is the ability to generate insights out of those sensors and get health scores and churn signals and upsell signals out of all of that data, and also to be able to feed that into rules that will let you set priorities dynamically. A dynamic priority is one that's calculated maybe every day. The advantage of a dynamic priority is when you come in the morning, you know exactly who you need to work with today. They've got a critical priority, and that's who you need to focus on. You can use rules for segmenting by industry or by journey stage. You can really effectively model your business. And then lots of different ways to engage with your customers, HTML email campaigns, calls, meetings, webinars, NPS and survey data, and then automation. So Amity lets you define alerts and notifications, have triggered workflows that get kicked off when certain conditions are true, certain insights are true, and then the standard playbooks for your internal workflows. So these are all the tools that we bring to our customers to help them build their closed loop workflows. I have a special treat for everybody. Our next webinar is on June 1st, and it's called Inside Customer Success at LinkedIn, the webinar. If you haven't read our Inside Customer Success profile of how customer success operates at LinkedIn, it's on our website. Just go download it. And for an hour, we're going to get to talk to Perry about the LinkedIn customer success processes, and he's an unbelievable resource, really really, really knowledgeable. It's going to be a great event. Okay, thanks everyone for being there. Check us out on Twitter, drop us an email, come and visit us at our website, and we really appreciate your time today, and we'll talk to you soon.